And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Monday, April 14th, 2025. And this outlook will be for Tuesday and Wednesday to set things up as of this Monday morning. We've had an area of low pressure increase. It's a strong dynamic system, cold pool air of aloft. As a result, strong gusty east-southeast winds swept across portions of south central Alaska late last night into early this Monday morning, with winds gusting as high as 60 to 80 miles an hour in the east hills above Anchorage. Palmer had a wind gust of 60 miles an hour, Ted Stevens 45. Plus there were flashes of lightning. I talked about that in the public segment yesterday as that cold pool of air aloft rotated in. There were flashes of lightning along the Gulf Coast. And that area of low pressure is going to work its way east-northeastward and weaken later Tuesday here, just outside of Cross Cove or Sound and also the area around Cape Spencer. But we expect Tuesday morning IFR conditions, Yakutat, up into the inner channels and British Columbia Mountains there in the Panhandle. And then back to the west, broad area of IFR conditions north and west of the Alaska Range, especially along the lower middle Yukon Valley, up through the central Brooks Range and central North Slope, and then through the lower Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait, including the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, YK Deltas. But as we go through Tuesday, we expect during the daytime conditions to improve to MVFR across much of the mainland and along the Gulf Coast, including the Panhandle. However, we're starting to see now IFR conditions come up from the North Pacific. There is going to be a stronger low pressure system similar to the one that impacted the same area over the weekend. This low will be just above 970 millibars. So it's a strong low and it has ample moisture and a strong wind field. So as that low lifts north-northeastward, we're going to see conditions deteriorating across the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula up into the southwest corner of the Gulf, especially as we go through Tuesday afternoon and certainly through Tuesday night. Now, by Wednesday morning, that system, this low coming out of the North Pacific, has IFR conditions because of the increasing easterly flow ahead of it. IFR conditions central, west arm of the Alaska Range, western Gulf, including Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula, down across Kodiak Island, and especially the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians, and even coming upward into western areas of Bristol Bay. Farther north, widespread IFR conditions from St. Matthew and St. Lawrence Island across the lower Yukon Delta, Seward Peninsula, Chukchi Sea coastline, including the Brooks Range, North Slope, and Arctic coast. For Wednesday afternoon, we find IFR conditions along the Gulf Coast and into the northern Panhandle along the central west arm of the Alaska Range. And this here will likely also have some IFR conditions up across the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, just because of the nature of this low. It's pretty wide influence and it has some pretty substantial moisture with it. But looking at Tuesday, Anaktuvik Pass as well as Adigan Pass in the east central Brooks Range, IFR conditions becoming MVFR. Along the west arm of the Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill starting out IFR Tuesday, giving way to MVFR. Rainy Pass also IFR to MVFR. Windy Pass should generally see MVFR conditions on Tuesday. And as we go east, VFR early at Isabel becoming MVFR. And then Tasta Pass should be far enough east. Generally, VFR conditions there will prevail through that pass on Tuesday. Down across the Copper River Basin, VFR early at Tanita becoming MVFR. And then Portage Pass also VFR conditions early on Tuesday, giving way to MVFR conditions. And there in the far north end of the Panhandle, especially as you get up there toward Chilkoot and White Passes, IFR conditions are expected to hold throughout the day Tuesday. Now, the freezing line here along the surface extends out through the central Bering, dips south of St. Paul into the Pribilofs, and then crosses the northern portion of the Alaska Peninsula, coming up through Cook Inlet into the lower Vatsu Valley, and then running along the northern Gulf Coast into the inner channels up against the British Columbia Mountains there. Of only real note, we can see the hints of that warmer air aloft coming in with that stronger low in the North Pacific. The low is still just off your screen Tuesday morning, but you can see freezing levels aloft rising 2, 4, and 6,000 feet. Now, as moisture begins to spread north-northeastward, as we go through the day Tuesday, we're going to see increasing threat of moderate icing spread up along the Alaska Peninsula into the southwest Gulf, Kodiak Island, Lower Cook Inlet, that'll come later in the day, but nevertheless, there could be moderate icing above 4,000 feet in those areas, and then south of the Alaska Peninsula above 6,000 feet. And by the time we get into Wednesday, we're going to see freezing levels aloft up into this region, rising to 8 and even 10,000 feet, because this is a warmer system than what we've had to deal with lately. And there could be some isolated, moderate icing, parts of the panhandle, and some showers or buildup of clouds we have above 4,000 feet, as well as in the interior. So this is the upper level jet stream pattern, 300 millibars or so. Very clearly defined sharp trough axis running from the Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait and then down here right between the central and eastern Aleutians. Ahead of it, this is a great example of an anticyclonically curved jet max, because we have a ridge out there in the North Pacific well south of the Gulf. So we have a jet core 120, 135 knots just out ahead of it. Behind it, the flow goes north-northwesterly, generally 65 to 85 knots. So that's an indication where you're going to find that the surface low pressure is going to be down in this region. Here's the mid-levels, 700 millibars. Strong wind field trying to spread up toward the Gulf. Out in the North Pacific, running 45 to 60 knots ahead of the system. Behind it, we find winds 50 to 60 knots from the western Aleutians down into the North Pacific. And then this shows the donut. This is, you can see the stronger wind field circulating around this low center that's coming up out of the North Pacific, still well south of the eastern Aleutians and the southern portion of the Alaska Peninsula. But you have winds circulating around this low on the order of 45 to 65 knots. And all of this is lifting northeastward. When you have this kind of tighter circulation, broad circulation, you're also going to have low-level wind shear across areas of the Alaska Peninsula and potentially eastern Aleutians, but especially Alaska Peninsula. And that's the case turbulence-wise. Tuesday, the greatest threat for severe turbulence will be along areas of the Alaska Peninsula, as well as into the eastern Aleutians. Surface to 4,000 feet with some low-level wind shear a threat as well. North winds here across the central eastern Aleutians, whereas you're going to have more of a southeasterly wind, Kodiak Island, coming into the northern part of the Alaska Peninsula. Farther north too, those winds will eventually be spreading further north, but there could be some moderate turbulence along and west of the Alaska Range, as well as maybe a little pocket here. Icy Strait corridor north of Sitka, but along the Gulf, any turbulence there. Surface to 6,000 feet. So the main thing is turbulence will be increasing across the Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, and as we get into Wednesday, that's all going to spread further north and east up into along areas of the Gulf Coast.